Hello everybody and welcome to Astro Pillars Astrology. I'm going to cover today a different topic that was based on one of the articles I recently just did on my Substack channel. But I just personally like to thank everyone who joined my Year of the Horse live. I got really good feedback and I appreciate all my followers, particularly I got quite a few new ones from this, and I got some good feedback in regards to people's charts. Now, just as a quick note, because people always email me and ask me, do I do chart readings? And obviously I do. So I've got a few different ways I do it. So one of the first ones is probably I usually combine the largest, if you so to speak, astrological reading. I combine Chinese astrology and planetary astrology. And usually when I cover this, I go through a Bar-2 chart, a planetary astrology chart, transits, progression, solar return, and a few other things. Like if it's specific, someone's got something specific they want to know. Also, I do Chinese astrological mini readings, which are just a summary of your Bar-2 four pillars chart. And a lot of people kind of like that option because it's quite a bit cheaper. And also I do offer horary astrology, and a lot of people don't know what horary astrology is. It's when you have a specific question in mind, and when you're clear about the question, you cast the chart and the chart gives you the answer. So that's all available on my website. And another thing a few people asked me too was in regards to learning Chinese astrology, because not many people are around kind of teaching it, so to speak. So I have a online course on my website, which how it works, usually it's just that online course. It's a fundamental thing that gives you a good grounding in the basics of Chinese astrology. And then I usually take people on one-on-one as one-on-one training. So I also have a book there called The Beginner's Guide to Chinese Astrology as well. So I just wanted to get that out of the way first, because a lot of people have been asking me, and it's important because sometimes I don't really clarify what I do when I'm on here. I just kind of rip straight into the astrology stuff. But now the reason I'm doing this kind of presentation is a little bit different from the other astrology stuff I've been doing lately. A lot of it's been on the eclipses and mainly the moons, the new and full moons and things like this. But as most people may not know, I've done a cell salt presentation on my channel, and I've covered all the 12 cell salts, and I've done them in 2 parts, and it was a pretty big thing. Which, by the way, I'm going to be running workshops in this coming up. I aim to get these on at some stage this year, hopefully around mid-year. I'm just got this in the pipeline because I want to run the workshops, and what they will be is it's going to be there's going to be 12 obviously in regards to each zodiac sign, and I'm going to go through obviously health benefits, psychological benefits, and Chinese medical side of things, of how to apply these salts from Chinese medicine diagnosis as well. But there'll be more up and coming about that soon. But there's a few people that asked me, particularly when I did the cell salt presentation on calcium phosphate, and I touched on some esoteric concepts which are related to Taoism, which is called what the concepts of what we call the Hun and the Po, right? Which are concepts in Chinese medicine that, and particularly when I was talking about calc phos, it calms what the Shen and the spirit and settles the Hun and the Po. And someone asked me, what does that actually really mean? What does that really all entail? And these are tied into, which I did write an article on this on my Substack channel, and I titled it "Your Organs Have Souls," right? Because in Chinese medicine and Chinese metaphysics, right, the ancient Chinese have a unique way of looking at the body, and this is probably how I fell in love with Chinese medicine. And so when we look at the body, they look at it from yin and yang, which is more holographic type theory. And this is why certain concepts in acupuncture, you can have imaging, which can represent the whole body. And you can also have things like acupuncture points, landmarks, and meridians, specific measurements, which are really sacred geometry on the body. And so I wanted to do this presentation because there's an interesting take on what they call the Zhang Fu, which are the organs, and the organs in Chinese medicine have souls. And so Chinese medicine really is deeply rooted in the Tao, in Taoism. And so, and myself being a practitioner, I have always been interested in the metaphysical side of things, probably originally more so strongly than in terms of treating people. But there was a saying in which really always stuck out to me in Chinese medicine, that, or the Taoists have a saying, all disease is rooted in the spirit. And I found I've mulled over this a lot, and it's an incredibly profound statement, because, I mean, firstly, I think this is one of the reasons why the ancient Chinese had divination arts, right? Because how do we really tap into what's going on with this, with one's spirit? Well, I think one of the best ways is looking at, well, of course, they had the concept of the I Ching, and then, of course, they had astrology. And there's two types of astrology that I personally know of in China. There's probably other schools of thought around the astrological type. One of them is called Zhi, which I know quite a bit about, but I don't practice. The main one I practice is Bazi, which is what known as the 4 pillars of destiny. But I think with that saying that all diseases are rooted in the spirit, then we have to really find a tool that can really access and find out what's really kind of going on behind the scenes, particularly with medical patterns and medical astrology. Then there's things that can be quite nebulous and hard to pinpoint and understand. Why the hell is this happening? And I think astrology really does give valuable insights into this and how it really works. But all organs in Chinese medical thinking have a specific soul to it. Now, and this gets into some pretty cool concepts. I'm just going to run through briefly, right? A few, because I think it's important to understand that when we look at how organs function on a physiological level, which is a great way to look at things, but there's also the metaphysical level. And I think probably from the time of conception, when we're in this conception, which is determined by the vibrational frequencies from our parents at that time of conception, right? Which is known, I guess the in utero experience is considered the first year of life, and it connects to the water phase in terms of the 5 elements, which really carries on to around the age of 3, which we then, obviously, when we are past that phase, then we enter the wood phase. So there's these phases we go through. Wood element, we start sprouting and growing. But what I found very interesting to note, that the in utero experience in planetary astrology is connected to the in utero experience. So when we're growing in the womb, this is all 12th house, right? And I found this fascinating because the 12th house is naturally ruled by Pisces, which rules the collective unconscious. And so, and of course, Pisces is ruled by the planet Jupiter. And I found it interesting because when we look at the planet Jupiter in Chinese astrology, Jupiter's connected to the wood element. And one of the souls of the wood element, or the liver particularly, because the souls reside in the yin organs, is what they call a concept they call the hun. And the hun as a soul is one of these, the hun, or the spirit of the liver, which is the hun, is a collective point, right? It collects our memories. All the memories we go through, all the experiences we go through in life are connected into the hun. And so I found this fascinating because of that Jupiter connection to the 12th house, and then of course the Jupiter connected to the liver and the wood element, and the wood element, one of the souls of the liver, is connected to the Hun, which is part of our collective unconscious, records our memories, so to speak. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this as we go on. And the collective unconscious, obviously, like the liver rules the ancestral mind, right? And it is deeply rooted and connected to this concept. But this also gets back to a pretty monumental subject, which is what they talk about in Taoist alchemy, which is called Jing, Qi, and Shen, which are known as the three treasures, right? Now, our Shen, right, is what determines our spirit. And our spirit is Shen's housed in the heart. And the heart is the governor of blood. And the heart is the sovereign ruler. So the heart is the emperor that's running the whole show. And this is really, really a deep subject, because the heart's the governor, but every part of these organs have Shen. And I'm going to talk about them because they'll call them the 5 attributes. And one of them I just mentioned is the Hun. So, and all these kind of things, right, that these concepts we have, are all related to really the soul's growth through reincarnation. For those who believe in reincarnation, that's a whole other thing. But this is how the Taoists would look at things, right? So, because they would want to prevent coming back and repeating patterns. So the heart is the emperor, and the heart is one of the most important thing. And I think a lot of people through life understand that the heart is part of us that we really need to pay close attention to, because the heart represents our authentic self. And this is why the ancient acupuncturist would never needle. Well, before the heart meridian was developed, so to speak, the heart meridian was developed later. But then there was always the pericardium, which is the heart protector. So they would needle into the pericardium, but they would never needle heart points, so to speak, because they would say that you have no right to invade the heart, because that's sovereign territory. That belongs specifically to this soul that's incarnated, and you have no right to violate what they're truly here to do, or their blueprint, or their curriculum that needs to be followed throughout their destiny. So this is it's a monumental thing in Chinese medicine, how they looked at these kind of things, the wisdom behind it, right? What the body is actually really all about, as opposed to just, a slab of meat with a few chemicals floating around, and take this pill and, this will chop and change things, and all these kind of things, right? Those are on a whole different level when it comes to this stuff. But and I think this is why the ancient Chinese, of course, developed what they call the 8 limbs of Chinese medicine, right? And the 8 limbs, 8 is a very sacred number in China. And the 8 limbs are related to what they call, of Chinese medicine, acupuncture, herbal medicine, diet therapy, tuina, which is massage, Tai Chi, Qigong, the exercise therapy. Then we have Feng Shui. We have meditation for cultivating the mind. Feng Shui, as we know, is sacred geometry. And then we have the astrology, right? The Ba Zi, to help fulfill our curriculum and to fulfill our destiny. So when we look at the soul, right, they talk about the Shen, the big Shen, which is the really big, great spirit. And then when we come to incarnate, we have what we call as a soul. And then, of course, there's smaller souls in our body, right, which these Taoists were talking about, that reside in what they call the yin organs of the body. So the yin organs are the kidneys, the liver, the heart, the lungs, and the spleen, right? And there's souls connected to these, right? So, for instance, I mentioned before, the liver houses the Hun, the lung houses the Po, The spleen houses what they call the Yi. The heart, the Shen. So, and these are also known as what they call the 5 attributes associated with our intellectual, psychological, and emotional development. And of course, this all translates through the 5 element cycle, right? So, and I'll get back to the question about, because I do mention this in my self-sought astrology lectures and certain things, articles I've written on these, right? But because I always pay attention to these kind of things, because I think on a deeper level, on a psychological level, we need to pay attention to these things, because obviously in clinic I've observed this and how these things really work, and it's fascinating to observe as an acupuncturist. But the water element, the kidneys house what they call the Zhi, which is the will to live, right? So when our kidneys get depleted, and it's very common, right? Because kidneys are the root of yin and yang. And when they are burnt out, a common term would be adrenal fatigue due to excessive caffeine abuse, or just working on overdrive and not resting and restoring our constitution, then the kidneys become burnt out, and then we lack the will to live. We can get very tired. There's no will. We can give up easily, this kind of thing. So, and the Zhi is connected to the water element, but it gives us the ability to live life in the physical body as a means of expression. So the kidney is a monumental organ and the most important one, obviously, in Chinese medicine. But the water element, right, resonates with the vibration of metal called the Po. Right, and the Po is one of the souls of the lung, which I'm going to talk about next. But so the kidneys give us that will to live, and astrologically they're connected to the planet Mercury and the luminary, the moon. So these two, water element's a little bit different from water element in planetary astrology, because it has, in Chinese astrology, because it has a very strong mercurial nature to it. But it also has that side of that lunar principle as well, of the feeling. So I'll just throw that in there, because that'll probably be a topic for a different time. But the lung, or the Po, is connected to the metal element, which is connected to the metal element. And the Po is a very, very interesting concept, right? And I'll talk about this because when the ancient Chinese talk about death, it's a separation of yin and yang, right? And the Po descends into the earth and the horn ascends up into the heavens. And mind-blowingly, right, Richard Wilhelm, for those who've read that fantastic book, I think it's the Golden Flower, The Secrets of the Golden Flower. He connects the horn to the animus and the Po to the anima, as in the Jungian psychological side of things, which is fascinating, and it plays out beautifully. But the Po is housed in the lungs and is connected to metal element, and is translated earthbound, or it's known as the corporeal soul, right? So in the evolution of the spirit, the Po is the soul that initiates, engages with the will to initiate destiny and the process of becoming an actual being. So it's associated with the lungs, and it gives it the ability to present with breath. So the Po is deeply connected to life force energy, chi, and physical strength. The Po resides in life energy. So the Po is actually really the etheric body, and it's connected to the planet Venus. And there's definitely an etheric concept there, because when we talk about the anima, the feminine, is dense, it's heavy. And I talk about this, I think, a bit further on in the article, but we can see that when there's certain poses, there's 7 poses that relate to the 7 emotions. And of course, if we don't master these, The Po as a soul is when we can become earthbound when we pass away, right? Because we're still attached to these feelings. And this is when we can become what the Taoists call a gui, which is like a ghost, earthbound and stuck. Then, of course, we have the Yi, which is consciousness and intention, which is connected to earth element. And the earth element is housed in the spleen. And it rules postnatal chi, which means after we've acquired the prenatal essence from our parents, then once we start developing our spleen and earth element energies, which happens around 7 and 8 years of age, we rely on our postnatal chi, which is our own personal energetic factory. And this is why earth element is so important in Chinese medicine. A lot of people obviously understand Zhu San Li, or in Tung acupuncture, Shi Hua Shang, that point, stomach 36 is very important because obviously we need a lot of earth to maintain energy. But so with the birth into the postnatal world, obviously our destiny is further defined. So after the first breath of the new soul, right, after we've, taken our first breath and we're connected we become in contact, right, with our immediate environment. So Earth defines boundaries and is ruled by the planet Saturn. Earth element is ruled by the planet Saturn, which makes sense, right? Because Saturn, especially with earth elements related to diet, and diet's one thing we chip away at every single day, and that's the typical Saturnian grind, which if you're pretty Uranian in nature, you don't really like, right? The day-to-day grind is one of the most difficult things: consistency, discipline. And we need to have this consistency and discipline with diet, otherwise we can get ill, right? Kind of digressing a little bit, but the Yi as a soul of the spleen is related to the intellect or the intelligence or the intellectual process, right? Which we need to accomplish our destiny, right? Our intellectual thought needs to be very clear and coherent, right? So the water, metal, and earth phases in this kind of building phase, I guess, of our journey through life are known as the first trinity, which represent the first evolution of the spirit as it enters the physical experience. So this is mind-blowing to me, because when I started looking into this stuff, the way they've thought about this and the whole concepts of existence are really all around this, and it just goes to show the wonder of the human body, really. And there's so much about it we actually really do not know, and a lot of people really aren't interested to know. I still think a lot of people do not really know what Chinese medicine can actually really do. And I've been practicing probably over 25 years now, and I realize that I feel like I'm only really just getting certain things. It takes a long time to really understand and master these things. But the next one, of course, is what we call the Shen, and Shen's connected to the heart and the fire element, and the concept of that is curriculum, fulfilling our curriculum. And the Shen is housed in the heart. It circulates in the blood. And the blood, obviously, the Shen can be traumatized when we talk about, I guess there's a saying in Chinese medicine language that people talk about Shen disturbance, which deranges the mind, because the heart actually is the mind. And this is when treatments like bloodletting and things like this are really important. Modern medicine will call that barbaric, but that would mean that they really don't understand what they're actually really using, because any really schooled acupuncturist will be extremely knowledgeable about bloodletting zones, and will have observed how effective how effective they are, not only on a physical level, right, but also on a psychological level. So the heart is connected to the luminary, the sun, and of course the Martian principle, Mars. So we need a lot of fire and libido, right, to fulfill our destiny. Otherwise, we'll come back and repeat the cycle, right? And it is extremely important. But the Shen is housed in there. It's the spirit, and it's also obviously in our blood. So, and a lot of psych problems, or what they call Dian Quang in Chinese medicine, is connected to this. And I guess Dian Quang can be translated things like bipolar and all these other range of psychological problems that are just so prevalent now in the world. But we also have what we call I think I've got a few slides here too, if I can. The Hun and the Po, these are the characters. This is the Hun. The Hun is related to wood element. It's connected to the liver, like I said before, and it's referred to as a component of the soul that is collective. The Hun collects our life experiences. It's what stores in the liver. And this is why the liver is such an important organ, not just on a physiological level, but on a metaphysical one as well. And it connects to the ancestral mind. Whereas earth is more the intellect. Wood element's more the ancestral mind. And that's being the intuitive faculties, right? Being able to tune in, to feel, listen. We get our hunches. We get our flashes of insight. And it rules sleep like the 12th house, right? It's mind-blowing how I've made this connection actually to how the Hun is connected to the 12th house, which makes perfect sense. 12th house rules sleep life. So the Hun is deeply connected to this. Why? Because there's a saying in Chinese medicine, when there's liver blood deficiency, we won't sleep, the spirit wanders, because the Hun's going to go to places it shouldn't go. And this is when people have dream-disturbed sleep, nightmares, panic attacks, things like this, because when the blood's not adequately storing in the liver, it won't protect the liver's soul, which is the Hun. So you wander off to places you shouldn't go, outside of your terrain. And yeah, it's really interesting stuff. So the Po is the soul of the moon, as they say, and the Hun is soul of the sun. These are the kind of the character translations there. And I just have this article here for people. This picture here. From a 5-element perspective, you can get a clear insight of how all this kind of stuff plays out. But it's interesting to note that, it's the Secrets of the Golden Flower book, where Richard Wilhelm talks about the Hun being the animus, the masculine principle, and the Po, the anima. And death, for those who kind of don't know, from a Chinese metaphysical point of view, is a separation of yin and yang. So the Hun ascends up to the heavens and the Po sinks down to the earth. So I guess, when you've fulfilled your curriculum and you've been quite free from what they call the 7 Pos, which is the 7 emotions, then we're not going to be earthbound and stuck to the earth. We're going to be able to rise up to the Hun. Hun means the ethereal soul, the ether, up into the clouds, so to speak. And it will connect to our Shen and our spirit. And it'll take our life experiences with us. And then if we need to reincarnate back, well, then the record's there and it'll be stored in our Jing and essence. So I think I've gone on a pretty wild ride for this. I hope it's not too deep for people. But in terms of the questions I got asked, in relation to calcium phosphate, which someone asked me, and could I expand more on the Hun and the Po? This is what I mean. This mineral, it's usually the stone medicines and the shells, like muli, which is all calcium, were used to sink the mind and calm the spirit. This is what I mean. Calcium phosphate, as an example for the tissue salts, is one of those minerals that settles the Hun and the Po, calms the spirit. And this is why it's so good for children who have behavioral problems, who can't concentrate, who are having night terrors, things like this. It calms, it settles the spirit. And I just wanted to share that with you guys. And I hope you get a lot out of this, because this is a really cool concept to think about and mull over. And there'll be more topics to come. And I hope this clears up a few things for people. For those who've got more questions, just contact me or write a comment, and I'll try and reply, and or you can email me personally. And thanks for listening, guys. I aim to bring in some more info shortly, as soon as I can.